There are 1.25 million species of animals, and all of them emit behavior. Psychology is the science of that behavior. This film describes some of the ways psychologists conduct a science of behavior, how they go about finding basic laws that describe different kinds of behavior in different species. Although we are interested in describing behavior in a natural environment, there are certain advantages to working in a laboratory. Not only can we control many important variables, but our subjects are available when we need them. Since we are interested in finding general laws of behavior, there are many cases when the particular response does not matter. For much of this film, we will study a simple response, such as pecking by a pigeon or lever pressing by a rat. After examining the basic principles of behavior theory with rats and pigeons within the confines of the laboratory, we shall extend our findings to a variety of species. And we shall progress from single responses to sequences of behavior. Psychologists and biologists have constructed many different models of behavior. For the sake of consistency, we shall describe only one of them, the model of behavior theory associated with B.F. Skinner. It is our belief that a systematic study of behavior within the framework of a single model is more valuable than one that skips from model to model in order to describe different kinds of behavior. Only time will test the adequacy of a model. Meanwhile, we can feel confident with Sir Francis Bacon that truth arises more readily from error than from confusion. Behavior can be classified into two main categories, respondent and operant. In respondent behavior, a response such as salivation is elicited by a stimulus. The relation between the response and the eliciting stimulus is called a reflex. The classical paradigm for respondent behavior shows that an unconditioned stimulus elicits a response. Meat powder in the mouth is an unconditioned stimulus that elicits salivation in a dog. This dog is salivating to food. As Pavlov discovered at the turn of the century, respondent behavior can be conditioned. If another stimulus, such as a bell, is paired with meat powder, eventually a new reflex is formed, and the bell alone elicits salivation. The new reflex is called a conditioned reflex. The new stimulus is called a conditioned stimulus, because it was conditioned to elicit the response. The sound of dog biscuits being rattled in the box has become a conditioned stimulus for salivation. The begging instinct in young robins consists of several reflexes: the gaping mouth, the distinctive cry, and the flapping wings. These reflexes are normally elicited when the parent bird lands at the nest. Another adequate stimulus is dangling a worm above the bird's head. A worm in the hand is not an adequate stimulus. The child's behavior in feeding the robin is not respondent behavior, it is operant behavior. In operant behavior, there is no eliciting stimulus. Operant behavior is emitted, and it usually occurs at some strength prior to any known conditioning. The strength, or rate, of a response is called the operant level of that response. Raccoons have a high operant level for manipulating objects.
Okay, Bonnie.
Even though there is no eliciting stimulus, operant behavior may be brought under the control of different classes of stimuli. One kind of stimulus that controls behavior is called a reinforcer. A reinforcer is defined as a stimulus that increases or maintains the strength of a response above operant level. The important thing about a reinforcer is that it is defined only in terms of its effect on behavior. Before we can say that applesauce is a reinforcer for this monkey, we have to show that applesauce increases the strength of some response above its operant level. For example, we might give the monkey applesauce only when he swings on the trapeze. Then, if the rate of trapeze swinging increases, we can say that applesauce is a reinforcer. It is important to remember that the reinforcing properties do not lie in the applesauce, but in its effect upon behavior. A reinforcing stimulus need not be related to a biological necessity. This 9-year-old dog has acquired a large repertoire of responses that result in having a person throw a stick that she then retrieves. Here, throwing the stick is made contingent upon the dog's sitting. Since sitting behavior occurs far above operant level, we can say that throwing the stick is a reinforcer.
Good dog.
This is a non-biological reinforcer occasionally encountered by students. The operant repertoire of most animals is very large. This mouse, for example, climbs over and under and through objects. However, not all responses are equally suitable for basic research in operant behavior. A good operant for basic research is one that can be performed quickly, repeatedly, and without much physical expenditure of energy. We shall be using the rate at which a response occurs as a measure of the strength of that response. This being so, it is convenient to have a response that is discrete, like lever pressing, rather than one that is continuous. A good response for basic research must be easy to define and measure. For convenience and precision, the response we elect to study in the laboratory is usually defined electromechanically. For a response to occur, the lever must be depressed far enough to operate this microswitch. There is no subjectivity on the part of the observer. The laboratory response usually studied in pigeons is the pecking of a small disc or key on the side of the bird's cage. The response key is a plastic paddle that is mounted back of the opening. When the bird pecks through the opening, the key is deflected and operates a microswitch. Like lever pressing, pecking the key is defined electromechanically. The advantages of the pecking response for research can be seen when we realize that a pigeon can maintain a rate of 4,000 or 5,000 responses per hour for as long as 15 hours, or he can respond at a lower rate for weeks at a time. Lever pressing and pecking can be automatically recorded by an instrument such as a cumulative recorder. This outsized cumulative recorder was designed for classroom demonstrations. It consists of a drum and of a marking pen. A horizontal line indicates the passage of time. A vertical excursion of the pen indicates that a response has been emitted. The responses are occurring more and more frequently. The rate of response is increasing. With a little practice, the experimenter can estimate the rate of response over any part of the record, and he can predict the course of the behavior as it unfolds before him. The great advantage of a cumulative record is that all of this can be accomplished while the behavior is in progress. Since the pen moves up a constant amount with each response, it is possible to measure the number of responses that have been emitted over all or any part of the cumulative record. And since the drum turns at a constant speed, it is possible to measure the amount of time that has elapsed. As our first example of operant conditioning, we will train a pigeon to peck a response key. Food will be the reinforcer during conditioning. Food is an effective reinforcer for pigeons when they are reduced to approximately 80% of their free feeding weight. When a bird arrives in the laboratory, he is given free access to food and water, and weighed daily to determine this free feeding or ad libitum weight. He is then gradually reduced to 80% of this weight by being fed a small amount every day. Once motivation is present, the first rule for teaching anything to any animal is to structure the situation so that the behavior is likely to occur. The pigeon is placed alone in a small empty box, which eliminates such incompatible behavior as nest building or flying away. The box contains two openings, the response key and the opening to the food magazine. Pecking the key turns out the key light and operates the feeder. The feeder light comes on and the feeder is raised so that the bird can reach the grain. When the circuit is broken, the feeder is lowered out of reach. Before conditioning can begin, adaptation and magazine training must take place. One way to facilitate adaptation to the box is to place food on the floor, especially in the region of the feeder. Magazine training means adapting the bird to the food magazine. Since food is to be the reinforcer, it is imperative that the bird be accustomed to eating from the feeder. When the feeder is raised for the first time, the bird usually startles and jumps back. For most pigeons, the initial operation of the feeder is aversive rather than reinforcing. Eventually, however, the bird approaches the feeder and eats from it. Magazine training is continued until the bird approaches the feeder from any part of the box as soon as the feeder is raised. Since the operant level for a pigeon pecking a key is, for all practical purposes, 0, we will not wait for a response to occur so that we can reinforce it. We will shape the pecking response. Shaping consists of reinforcing closer and closer approximations of the response we wish to condition. First, we reinforce any behavior that brings the bird to the end of the box near the key. We his head a little closer to the key. And again. When we demand a little more, he turns away, so we reinforce his return to the right end of the box and a motion toward the key. This preliminary behavior is not being recorded on the cumulative recorder. That will be a record of pecking behavior only. Here the experimenter will try to reinforce a pecking motion toward the key, but will actually reinforce turning a circle. His left foot is beginning to turn. The behavior that is reinforced is the behavior that immediately precedes reinforcement. Another motion toward the key. And he pecks the panel just above the feeder. Now he moves his body forward toward the key. But when we try to raise the criterion, we lose him again, so we reinforce a movement of the head and earlier approximations where his head is near the key. Some minutes have passed. He has been coming very close to the key. A pecking motion toward the key. We wait. And he pecks the panel. And again. He made no closer approximations for several minutes. And even now, after the first few responses, pecking the key is not established, and we continue to shape. He pecks the edge of the key, but this does not operate the micro switch. We reinforce approximations until the next pecking response, when he responds several times in succession. Pecking is erratic at first, but the response is now firmly established. The quickest way to strengthen behavior is to reinforce every response. The reinforcement of every response is called continuous reinforcement, or CRF. Strictly speaking, this bird is not receiving CRF because he pecks more than once before lowering his head to the feeder. Continuous reinforcement produces a steady rate of response in a short period of time. It is not, however, the most economical way to maintain behavior. And, unless a very small amount of food is given each time, the animal may become satiated after as few as 50 or 60 responses. After a response has been conditioned, if the reinforcement is withheld, the response eventually declines in strength. This decrease in response strength, when reinforcement is discontinued, is called extinction. When reinforcement has been continuous, extinction takes place fairly rapidly, and relatively few responses are emitted. Extinction following continuous reinforcement consists of bursts of responses interspersed with plateaus of no responding. Frequently, there is emotional behavior, such as flapping wings. These characteristics of extinction after CRF, including emotional behavior, have been found to obtain from many species of animals, including human children and adults. During the course of the film, we will demonstrate the basic principles of behavior theory with different animals and in different situations. Whenever we are describing conditioning, we will follow the same procedure, even though the order or the emphasis may change with a particular behavior being conditioned. Before he does anything else, the experimenter or the animal trainer or the teacher must decide exactly what behavior he wants to establish and how it will be defined and measured. He then usually measures the operant level of this behavior. The final performance tells him precisely where he's going. The operant level tells him where he must start. He selects a reinforcer and, if necessary, deprives the animal to be sure that the reinforcer will function as such. In the laboratory, it is usually the apparatus that structures the situation so that the desired behavior is likely to occur and incompatible behavior is unlikely or impossible. The animal must be adapted to the experimental apparatus or to any other features of the situation that may be unfamiliar. If the operant level of the desired behavior is very low, the experimenter begins by reinforcing a response that is already in the animal's repertoire. Presenting food when the bird turns his head toward the key increases the probability that he will make some other movement in the direction of the key. Shaping consists of reinforcing successive approximations of the behavior to be conditioned. We have described the principles of operant conditioning with the pigeon. We will now extend these principles to other animals, both inside and outside of the laboratory. Most of the early work in behavior theory used the white rat as a subject, and so does much that is being done today. This is a modern version of the apparatus that Skinner introduced in the 30s when he published The Behavior of Organisms. The box is small, which increases the probability that the rat will approach and perhaps touch the lever, and decreases the probability of incompatible behavior. When the lever is depressed, the light comes on and a pellet of food is delivered to the food cup. Lever pressing is defined electromechanically, and the light shows when the lever is pressed far enough to operate a microswitch and qualify as a response. This is a final performance of a rat already trained to press the lever. Each response is reinforced, and the rat has established a pattern of pressing with the right paw that involves little wasted effort. Compare his behavior to that of this rat, which has been adapted to this box and magazine trained, but never reinforced for any specific approximation of lever pressing. The rat has been deprived of food for 24 hours and is at approximately 80% ad lib weight. His operant level for pressing the lever is very low. Shaping lever pressing in a rat uses the same principle of successive approximations as shaping pecking in a pigeon. The first approximation reinforced is putting his nose near the lever. The experimenter hopes for a closer approximation, so the next response of sniffing the lever is not reinforced. Touching the light produces the next reinforcement. And the next. The next approximation occurs 2 minutes later. He raises himself on his right foot and lifts his left foot off the floor. There is a lot of activity near the lever, and then the right foot is up and forward. This is reinforced, and so is the response of raising the left foot toward the lever. And then, since the light did not go on, it wasn't defined as a response, but it was a very close approximation. He's not chewing any new pellets, just the old ones. Eventually, he raises his foot again and is reinforced when it touches the lever, even though he doesn't press it. Now, reinforcement only when he rises and touches and presses. This time it's the other foot, and still not hard enough to turn on the light. Another partial press, and now the light comes on. So this is the first definable response. Now, every press is sufficient to turn on the light. Most grown dogs have a high operant level for jumping over natural barriers, such as stone walls. But this does not mean that the response will occur on command in an artificial situation. This dog has already been trained to heel and to stay and to come when he is called. We will use these responses in shaping the high jump. First, we bring the dog's behavior under control with the leash. And we use a solid jump to prevent the incompatible behavior of running under the jump. Since the dog has been trained to heel, the handler first goes over the jump with the dog. The dog is still following his handler, but when the handler goes around the outside of the jump, this is an approximation of the dog's jumping alone. The command over precedes the response, and praise follows. The next approximation is a difficult advance because the dog's jumping alone is incompatible with his behavior of staying beside his handler.
Over. Over. Good boy. Good boy, dog. That's a good dog.
Now to shape another dimension of the final performance. The height is raised, but the handler goes back to the earlier approximation of taking the jump with her dog.
Over. Good boy.
And works up again with the jump at this new height.
Over.
During the shaping, praise is continuous. Praise is the reinforcer used most often in dog training. Of course, food is effective too, but it is often impossible to deliver food immediately following the response.
Over. Over. Good dog. Good dog.
The jump is raised again, and the dog takes it with the handler going around the side.
Over. Good dog. Over.
On the next trial, he balks when sent by himself. So the jump is lowered in order that the earlier approximations do not extinguish. Shaping has proceeded too rapidly. His behavior is disrupted and he balks again, even though he has already jumped this height. Back to an earlier approximation. He takes this jump when the handler goes around the side. In approximately 10 minutes, he is ready for the next to highest jump. He balks the first time, as does the handler. The response of coming to the handler is already in his repertoire, so she leaves him on one side of the jump and calls him over, leading him with the leash. Then a large step forward as she removes the leash.
Over. Good boy. Oh, what a good dog. Good.
The total training time is less than 30 minutes when the handler adds the last board. Jump is now 36 inches high.
Over. Good boy.
The fact that this dog now takes this particular kind of 36-inch jump on command does not mean that he will generalize the jumping response to other obstacles. The training of police dogs requires the differentiation of many different responses in many different stimulus situations before they can clear all of the objects on this obstacle course.
Over. Over. Steady. Steady. Over.
All of these different responses were shaped. For each obstacle, the trainer reinforced successive approximations of the final performance.
Turn.
conditioning need not take place in a laboratory, and reinforcement need not be scheduled by any human agency. This toy parrot speaks 11 different phrases in random order. If the sound of the parrot speaking is a reinforcer, then by definition it can condition the behavior that produces it. This 3-year-old boy is in unfamiliar surroundings, and he is not accustomed to the floodlights and cameras. His father is present so that he will feel more at home, to structure the situation so that some behavior will occur. The father was specifically asked not to reinforce any particular behavior. One of the first responses is twisting the ring. 3- and 4-year-olds have a very high operant level for turning things. Then he manipulates other parts of the parrot. He touches the ring, but doesn't pull it out far enough to produce a sound. Since the reinforcer is the sound itself, the first approximation that can be reinforced is one that actually produces the sound. He touches the ring again. He pulls it part way. This is 2 minutes later. Actually, a number of responses are being strengthened. He has now learned how to keep the parrot on the perch, and he holds it more efficiently. The parrot is given to another boy who quickly learns to pull the ring. Now, another response is being strengthened. The reinforcer is probably tactual. A high and stable rate of response. The cumulative response records for both boys for the entire period show the reinforcing properties of a talking parrot in shaping and maintaining behavior. The quickest way to shape or strengthen behavior is to reinforce each occurrence of the response. Once the behavior is firmly established, reinforcement can be delivered intermittently rather than following every response. Reinforcement is delivered on a schedule that states the contingencies on which reinforcement depends. In some schedules, called interval schedules, reinforcement is contingent upon the passage of time. Other schedules, called ratio schedules, are contingent upon the number of responses emitted. Still other schedules are variations or combinations of interval and ratio schedules. This Philippine macaque is receiving banana pellets on a variable ratio schedule. The number of responses on which reinforcement depends varies, but on the average, every 100th response is reinforced. Variable ratio reinforcement produces a very high and a very stable rate of response. Human behavior is also maintained in strength on a variable ratio schedule. One of the practical applications of laboratory work in the field of behavior theory is the teaching machine, or programmed instruction. Before we can condition or shape or teach any behavior, we must specify the final performance. This is a frame near the end of this program, which was designed to teach the fundamentals of electricity. The behavior of answering questions such as these is the behavior the program is designed to shape. As with the laboratory animals, we start with behavior that already exists in some strength. These first frames are among the earliest in the program, and a boy ready for the program is able to answer the questions. Programmed instruction introduces into the classroom some of the controls of the laboratory. The requirement of a differential response, such as writing the answer, or even saying the answer to yourself, reduces the likelihood of incompatible behavior, such as daydreaming or doodling or looking out the window. One principle of behavior theory is that reinforcement must be delivered immediately. This, of course, is impossible in the conventional classroom situation. But here the student makes his response and then has only to advance the program to learn at once whether or not his response was correct. Fortunately, being right constitutes a reinforcer for most students. Good programs are constructed so that the student usually is right. As a program progresses, the material appears to be increasingly more difficult to someone who has not worked through the preliminary frames. But for the student who has worked through the whole program, the requisite behavior will be easily available. One of the advantages of programmed instruction is that each student proceeds at his own rate, reaching advanced material as he is ready for it. The slower student is not lost, nor the faster one bored. As for the teacher, he is spared the endless preparation and correction of routine drills, and he can spend his time on his lectures and on special projects. He also has more time to give individual attention to his students. Other kinds of behavior can be programmed. B.F. Skinner has developed a program to teach handwriting that is notable for three things: the immediacy of the differential reinforcement, the way it shapes successive approximations of writing, and the intrinsic reinforcement of the task itself. The program is called Write and See. Dr. Skinner explains why.
The write and see method uses a special chemical process to give the child an immediate report of whether he's made a mark correctly or not. When the child learns to write, he moves his arm and hand, and that leaves a mark. To learn well, he should learn immediately whether that mark is correctly made. And with this method, there's a special ink and a special chemical treatment of the paper. When he makes a correct mark, the pen writes a black line. If he goes off, draws a mark which is not correct, it leaves a light yellow mark. So as he works, as he writes, he gets an immediate report that what he's done is correct. And of course, this is a very important principle in operant conditioning, that you get an immediate reinforcement, a differential reinforcement for the correct response, and you learn very quickly when you've not made a correct response. This material is also programmed in the sense that, first of all, you ask the child just to make a small part of a letter. And when he's done that, then he goes on and makes more of the letter. And as the program proceeds, he makes more and more of it until he's making the whole letter. And of course, at each stage, the ink is telling him whether he's right or not. Ordinarily, some time before the teacher can come by and point out to the child that a mark has not been correctly made. With the write and see method, the color reaction gives the child an immediate report, and therefore effective in shaping his behavior as rapidly and as accurately as possible.
We have been able to show you how this program shapes successive approximations of handwriting, and how the special ink tells the child whether or not he is correct at the very instant he is drawing a letter. What the camera has not shown is the powerful intrinsic reinforcement of the work itself. At the end of the session, the children stayed firm. They were separated from their workbooks only when they were given pages to take home.